Great to have my good friend Tom Drozt on the show with us today. Tom, thanks for being a part of the program.
Hey, good afternoon, Paul, and thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Tom, you are on my LinkedIn profile. You're the preeminent comment when you commented about us working together. Tell people about our background together.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Paul, I first met you back in Baltimore when there was that big changeover from the Democrat to Republican, and Hogan came in, and we got a new CEO. But what I remember the most, I mean, outside of the Jonas snowstorm, we can get into that too, but was that, hey, you know what? We're going to make some changes around here. This is a public agency, and we're going to do things a little bit different. And you know what? Anybody who has a position of authority needs to start making some decisions, and we need to start making some change. We're going to make it now. That's what I felt. I could feel the difference.
Yeah, that's great. That's right. That's the way I am. And Tom, I'm so happy for you now as CEO of Ben Franklin Transit there, the storied transit system in Washington State, Southern Washington. Your background, you've had let's circle around this memory. My recollection of you, Tom, is that you were committed to excellence at the MTA. I mean, you were living still, I think, out west somewhere, and going home once a month maybe for a long weekend, and being my director of bus operations. We had one of the largest bus operations in America. We had 750 buses. We actually rebooted the entire network, and you and I went through some big storms together. And you were, Mr. 24/7, always there. And I always told you, I don't know if you remember this, but I always said, Tom, you're bigger. Your mind is a CEO mind. You think bigger than just day-to-day operations. You think the whole thing. And so you've been around the country in several bus operations, running them directly. So I'm so happy you finally got to the CEO seat.
Yeah, no, thanks, Paul. And you know what? I actually do remember that. And so we were in the Washington facility, or they call it the Washington Yard.
Yeah.
And we were walking down the corridor where we're having that discussion. And I know it was a little bit after you got there and everything. And I could tell that you took everything in real fast. And I mean, you hit a lot of the staff, got the information, and then you were able to go ahead and diagnose it and, give your comments back. And that's when I knew that we were going to make some big changes and, for Baltimore MTA and such. And we did, I mean, it's the proof's in the pudding. And also that, in your career, Paul, there's just different things that happen, out of the blue that are turning points in your career, and just kind of open up your mind and such. And definitely for me, that was one of them, without a doubt. And that was probably the start of really taking that transit private model and intertwining it with the, public agency, government model of transit.
Yeah. And then after I left, what did you do? Tell us about your career path and how you ended up there.
Yeah. So after I left Baltimore, I took a job in San Joaquin. I wanted to get back to the West Coast for, lessen the travel. And I went to San Joaquin to be the chief operating officer. It was definitely a smaller agency. And I was only there for a short time before, I learned that my wife developed cancer. And so in order to, once we found out, I ended up leaving my job in San Joaquin and stayed home in Phoenix and took care of my family matters and so forth. And after that, what happened was when I was ready to get back in the saddle, I ended up taking a job with First Transit as the assistant general manager there in Tempe, Arizona. My home is Phoenix, Arizona. And again, pretty decent size agency, 600 bus operators, 350 buses. And, trying to work the magic there and, conquer all the challenges that any transit agency has. And from there, First Transit had a contract in LA that we were kind of struggling at. And they asked me to go out to LA and see if we can't, get some, just take that contract and, bring it alive and get it back, rolling and, on the right foot. So I was out there for about a year. We did end up losing the contract to MV. But what MV did was they said, hey, Tom, can you stay on and be the general manager here? And so forth. And I did. And I was out at the Carson location working for MV, one of the LA Metro properties. We ended up turning that division around related to finances and KPIs. Our performance went from, it was rough to we're hitting, 8 of 9 KPIs every month and did really well there. And then after my Carson stint, I got it to the point where it was all turnkey and everything. And I always had this dream of 55 and out, right? Hey, let's retire. So at that point, I was actually 56, when that happened. I said, I think I'm going to retire, and family's okay and everything. And kind of went back home and kind of did all the house stuff, everything like that. My wife's still working. And what happened there, about a year went by. I get the best yard in the neighborhood and all that. One thing I didn't think through was that at that age, everybody's still going to work. So I was kind of home alone. And so it kind of got a little boring. All my friends, they were still working. So, so there was a little disconnect for myself there. But it gave me a chance to just reevaluate myself, my life, where am I going, what should I want my career. Of course, I've always kept up with all the transit publications. So I kind of read what's going on and everything. And out of the blue, a recruiter called me and said, hey, I got this one client and they're looking for somebody, to head up their operations division. And you have a lot of skills and experience related to it. Would you be interested? And of course, I said, I'll always be interested in listening. And, and so I did and everything like that. And she didn't quite tell me who it was. And she said they were kind of far along in the process, in the recruitment process. But she thought that would be a really good fit. She went back to the client, which happened to be MARTA. And
in Atlanta, the transit system in Atlanta.
Yep,
yeah,
exactly. Yeah. She went back to them and said, hey, I got this one guy, Tom Drozt, and he'd really fit well with you all and everything. And so they agreed to, give me an interview. And so we did and went there and went through that process. And next thing you know, I'm in Atlanta, right? And Atlanta is a huge, huge animal. I felt like I was back in Baltimore, but there was definitely a difference. I felt Atlanta had great bones and just need the right different players, but had a lot of things going on. And so I hung out in Atlanta for a little bit before, this opportunity at Ben Franklin came up to be the CEO. So at MARTA, I was the deputy chief of bus operations there.
Okay.
And so
I remember we had multiple conversations. You were filling me in and it was a big operation. And I think you were making some real progress there.
Yep. We certainly were. A lot of projects going on, a lot of movement without a doubt. And I think even if I read today, they hit a couple of milestones.
Congratulations to Kali and the team there. Yeah.
Well, absolutely. And they got their rapid is going to be starting up here shortly. And we were working on those plans. Just like everywhere, manpower is somewhat of an issue. So that takes a little bit of a draw on, when you're trying to progress. But yeah, so when I saw the Ben Franklin opportunity, I just saw as, another opportunity to go ahead and, jump up a step and run an entire organization by myself on the government side.
Yeah.
I've done a private side. And so I jumped at the opportunity and here I'm at Washington.
And how long have you been there in this job?
So I've been here 7 months now.
Okay. It's a great story, Tom. It's a great story of a yeoman's kind of career. And a lot of people in our industry have a similar career of yours where you have to move around in order to get these jobs, the bigger jobs. You can't always just stay in the same location, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. If you're eager and you want to move up and you also want to experience transit as I'll say as a whole.
Yeah.
And what I say as a whole, on the private side and the agency side, from small operation to large operation and everything in between, I have to say, there are things here now that I'm at Ben Franklin that I'm learning that one would think that you would know already because, Tom, you've been in transit 26 years and you've been, kind of around the country, but transit here is a little bit different.
Yeah. It's that old saying, right? If you've seen one transit system, you've seen one transit system because they're all so different. Thanks for sharing with us. I love a great story like that of a career. Tell us some about your agency now, kind of scope it out for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ben Franklin is made up of approximately 420 employees. We have 3 modes of transit. We have our fixed routes and our fleet size there is about 75 vehicles. We have our paratransit, and that fleet size is at 81 vehicles. And then we have our rideshare / van pool, and that fleet size is 200 vehicles. So actually, rideshare is our largest mode.
Oh, yeah.
Of transportation. We also have microtransit, which we contract out to help out with our first and last mile challenges. Our budget is close to $100 million between operating and capital. Our overall ridership is just north of, annually, it's north of 3 million a year. And I have to say that the lay of the land here in Tri-Cities is you can get anywhere in a vehicle in 20 minutes. So in transit, that's our biggest enemy.
That's right.
And why I say that, Paul, is because our competition is the cars, right? We want riders, but if we can't get you there, if it's taking, and what's an hour and 20 minutes to get you there on a route, but you could do it in 20 minutes in a car, you're going to opt for the car. So that's one of our biggest challenges here at Transit Transit.
And you're located just over the Oregon border, kind of in the central part of Washington State, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah. We're approximately 31 miles north of the Oregon border, and we're 3 hours east of Seattle.
Okay. And what's your governing structure there? Do you work for a city government, or you have your own board, or how's that work?
So we're our own authority. Yeah, I report out to a board of 9, and that would consist of the different commissioners in Franklin County and Benton County, and then the city of Pasco, city of Kennewick, and city of Richland. A couple of those areas have two members as opposed to one.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you've got multiple jurisdictions which are funding the agency. Yeah, and how's ridership? Is it versus, I don't even want to say the word pre-pandemic, but how's ridership doing and how's finances doing?
Yeah. You know what? Let me start off with finances. We just had an initiative, 2117, a month ago or so, maybe it's been 2 months now, that they were trying to repeal one of the tax, but the voters overwhelmingly voted it down, so we didn't lose any funding there. Overall, from a funding standpoint, we're in pretty decent shape. I'll leave it at that. There's no hard challenges. And from the ridership standpoint, I'll speak of, post-COVID, post-pandemic, right? And we've been on the growth pattern every single month, every single year, and then every single month of that year as well. Last year, we, hit the scales of that 3 million. And this year, we're looking to hit 3.3 million. Our population overall in the Tri-Cities is 300,000 individuals.
That's great.
So, yeah. So every month we're just doing about 300,000 a month in ridership, to give it some kind of perspective.
And you operate all those services except for the microtransit with your own employees?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I love your vision, Tom. When I was at MTA, I came up with the 4 cornerstones: a safe, efficient, reliable, with world-class customer service. And your vision is to build a transit system that's reliable, accessible, and future-focused. Tell us about that.
And we talk about the reliability. We're talking about 2 things here, 2 immediate things, right? The bus always showing up on time, and the bus, the schedule that you put out, you match it. And that's the reliability piece. And that right there alone, right, is going to help us kind of go ahead and, I'll call it, defeat our enemy of the vehicles. I keep bringing that up because that is truly the challenge that we have. And so we're looking at all of our routes to go ahead, and any of those routes that are in that an hour and 10 minute window, how do we reduce that to about 40 to 45 minutes? The
headways?
Absolutely. So that's huge in itself. And then the future, I'll tell you, Paul, most of my career has been on the warm weather area. And I know it definitely was a little chilly in Baltimore. Don't get me wrong. I do remember that. But our different amenities here, I'm focusing on our bus stops. We need 4-season bus stops here. These people here in Tri-Cities, they're very used to taking the bus, and, the bus stop is there. We don't have any heat lamps, and we have certain shelters, aimed at certain ways just for the wind. We need to put more heat lamps in our bus shelters. I'm looking to really improve the passenger amenities here, because that's where it really starts for the passenger.
Yeah.
Is waiting for the bus. So if you can put in amenities that can go ahead and, I'll say make it comfortable in every way, the passenger, that's their first impression of transit. Once they get on the bus, everybody's on their phone and get their 12 minutes on the bus, get the
Yeah.
all happy,
That's good. I love that. You know what else I love, Tom, is I've always loved your leadership philosophy and approach. Tell us about that, Sami. I mean, you're when I remember us working together for those few years, you were collaborative, transparent, you were forward thinking. Tell us about your approach to leadership.
Yeah. So what I've learned over all the years of watching everybody, watching, good leaders, watching challenged leaders, to me, the first thing that comes to mind is the listening, understanding the needs of the employees, your riders, your stakeholders before making any decision. I mean, absent of listening, you're just flying by the seat of your pants, making decisions that might not, be in sync with the area that you're in. And then another thing that it took me a little while to learn was, empowering my team. A lot of times I felt like, I had to be the one to do it, and in order for it to get done and done the right way. But, as a leader, trusting your employees to take the ownership and to drive the solutions is key. Because if you try to do it alone, you're going to bottleneck, right? And slow down the entire process. And then also, being data driven, but being people focused as well.
I love that.
In combination is what you need, using those metrics as only as a guide, but without losing sight, of your passenger. And not always your passenger, but your internal customers as well. So that's very important as well. So, and then as we all know, the only thing constant in transit is change, right? So adapting to change, whatever it may be, whether it's the technology, whether it's a pandemic, whether it's, the different resources and assets that you have, being able to go ahead and take each one of those things and how do you create a scenario, to your advantage, just overall in your system. So, so ultimately leadership is about, right, building a strong, motivated team, that shares that same commitment to service excellence.
Great philosophy, I think, putting people first. And I know you guys are very focused on community engagement and workforce development, and you're really focused on expanding transit access, leveraging technology, and strengthening partnerships. But I want to focus for a few minutes on your current initiatives and projects. You mentioned you're doing some bus stop upgrades. Tell us about some of the other current key initiatives that you're working on with improving service, enhancing infrastructure, getting things ready for the future there.
Yes, without a doubt. So, so we have a director of facilities, and I was mentioning to Shane, I said, Shane, we need to put a brick in the ground this year. And what I'm referring to is a new facilities building for our facilities department. We have a phenomenal facilities team, just like a lot of other agencies. And it's not just, the administration building and the ops building, but it's all the transit centers, it's all the bus stops. And being a 4-season transit agency, those individuals are key, just to, keeping everything up to snuff and things like that. So we're looking to build a new facilities for them right now. They co-share with maintenance.
Okay.
They're trying to get it off. As you mentioned, our bus stop upgrades, which are huge. August of 2025, we will be getting our first express route, And so what's so important about that, of course, is while we'll still have the Route 1, and the Route 1 is one of our heavier ridership routes, it does take, an hour and 15 minutes to go from end to end. So we'll have a 1X, with limited stops from end to end. So those individuals, have that choice to go ahead and jump on an express, and we can compete with the local traffic and get to your destination. I don't want to even say 40 minutes, because 40 minutes is end to end. But now you might be able to get, if you're the third stop in, you might actually get to your destination in 30 minutes, and that's where the real value is, giving the time back to the passenger so they can go on about their business, as opposed to spending that time on the bus. So that's going to be huge for us. We'll have a big kickoff with that express route. The organizational restructuring, just taking the organization as a whole and looking at overall, seeing if we have all the right pieces in place. We put together our PMO office, our project management office, and it consists of 3 project managers, as we have a lot of different projects going on here. I told this team here, we have all this money. If we don't spend the money, somebody else will. And I know the folks that give us the grants, they don't want the money back. They've already allocated and given it out. So we need to do our part. And not only that, if we're not, using that resource, then we're not enhancing our transit system for our community. So that's huge in itself. So we created that PMO office. Our fleet modernization, we're introducing 4 electric buses and exploring the hydrogen fuel technology. It seems like hydrogen is, at least in this area here, is coming more alive.
Yeah.
And especially with the weather and the things that are going on with battery electric. We don't want to have one fleet, one fuel source. We want it to be diversified. So we're probably going to end up with, the clean burning diesel, some electric, and tap into the hydrogen aspect of it as well. And being that our fleets are, like I said, rideshare 200, we'll definitely do something with that fleet to go ahead. And that might become half hydrogen, half electric, where I know a lot of the other agencies or bigger agencies, the big fleet is bus. In our case, it's the rideshare. And then also our fare structure. So that'll be another one of our initiatives that we have going on this year. Our fares are very reasonable. It's $1.50 with a transfer. So that's probably unheard of in some places. What we're trying to do there, still got a lot of work with it. We're trying to do away with the transfer. So say, hey, how about a $2 all day? And it's kind of, if you're spending $1.50 to go one way, you're probably spending $1.50 to come back. So it's $3. How about $2? You can ride as many times as you want all day, So we're looking at some options,
Yeah, that's great, Tom. Very good. Well, it sounds like you all have a lot going on. I want to close this out with some of your personal reflections and closing thoughts. I guess, what has been your proudest moment so far as you're just under a year? What's been your proudest moment as CEO?
I'd say it's the dedication and passion, Paul, of our team as we work to transform public transit in the Tri-Cities. The teams here, being that a lot of folks come from this area, a lot of our employees have been with Ben Franklin Transit 1 and even 2 decades. There is a lot of passion for the work that they do. And so whether it's rolling out a critical infrastructure upgrade, launching, our first express route, or expanding access to cleaner and more efficient transportation options, I take great pride in the progress that what we're doing, we're making a difference together. That in the end, the human capital is our big asset for any transit agency and making a difference overall.
I agree with that. And then maybe you could just give us some final thoughts about the future of transit. You've mentioned the only constant is change, and we have to adapt and progress. But what are your thoughts now as transportation enters this 2025 year, the end of the first quarter century and headed into the next?
So my thought is we really have to take a look at our industry as a whole from the human capital side of it, and us folks that have 2 decades and 3 decades in our industry, start preparing our younger generation with the experience and knowledge we've gained over the years and handing it down to them so that our industry doesn't go deficient in the human capital side of it. That's what I see. Pickings are slim sometimes, and maybe we don't do a good enough job, us as leaders in transit, to find those individuals and really, invest and mentor them so that we can, strengthen our bench overall. That's what I see. We could have talked about technology and the buses and all these flying ships and everything like that. But at the end of the day, on any of those things, you still need the people. So the people, to me, are the most important asset overall, and we need to continually invest in our folks.
That's probably why you and I always click very well, because I have the same philosophy. It's not really about the buses or the technology, the trains. It's about the people, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And whether you're providing it or they're your passengers, we're in the people business. And, back in the Ralph Cramden days and all that, everything, point A to point B.
Right.
But even in that, you watch some of those old shows, there's a people aspect to that as well. And maybe a little bit different than today, but it was definitely a little bit more neighborly back then. And, in a place like Tri-Cities here, we definitely can capture that element because we are kind of a small town.
Well, thanks for sharing some of your journey with us, Tom, and your experiences there at Ben Franklin Transit in Washington State. We wish you the very best as you continue to modernize and serve the people.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate it. Good luck to everybody.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Transit Unplugged with our guest, Tom Drozt, CEO of Ben Franklin Transit in Washington State. Now, coming up next week, we have someone whose episode was one of our most popular last year, Stephen Gardner, CEO of Amtrak. Paul sat down with Stephen in his office at Amtrak to learn what Stephen has planned to upgrade, improve, and expand America's national rail carrier. Our listener survey is in full swing. Make sure you get your voice heard and put your 2 cents in on what we do on the show here. Just visit transitunplugged.com/survey and have your say. The link's also in the show notes. Transit Unplugged is brought to you by Modaxo. At Modaxo, we're passionate about moving the world's people, and at Transit Unplugged, we're passionate about telling those stories. So until next week, ride safe and ride happy.